welcome to the show. This time we're talking about creative thinking techniques that you can use either on your own if you're wanting to do some thinking and get some new ideas, or you can use them in workshops. So welcome to the show. I'm always happy to see you. It's great that you're here. Thank you. And of course, always join in and let me know your comments, your thoughts. Do you use any of these techniques that I'm going to be sharing with you, and have you got some others that are your favourites too? So we'll get on with the show right after this.
This is the Idea Time Show with Dr. Jo North, helping facilitators expand their creativity, confidence and impact through the power of innovation in action. Gain confidence as a facilitator, confidence with the technology, and confidence with your content and event design. Tune in every week for practical tips, strategies, and interviews that will accelerate your personal and business success. And now, here's your host, Dr. Jo North.
Well, have you been in any sessions recently where your clients or your team have said to you, we keep coming up with the same ideas, or we really need some fresh thinking, or the strategies that we used to use are just no longer useful because the world is changing so quickly? We always need to be thinking of fresh and different ideas and tackling strategic and innovation challenges in new ways. And creative thinking techniques can help us to do that. So we've got a great show planned and there's lots to cover. I'm going to be talking about the foundations of creative thinking for strategy and innovation, what it is, why do we need to do it, and some principles for how best to do that as well. I'll be sharing some techniques and tools and some real world applications. So these are things that I use regularly. I've used them for a long time, lots of different options for you here, and they work with people in all sorts of industries and sectors and sizes and stages of business and organisation all over the world. So I hope you enjoy it. I find these really valuable tools and techniques, and they're also very enjoyable. So they get results and they're good fun and nice, good creative stretch for people to do as well. So let's just start off by thinking, what are these creative thinking techniques? Well, essentially all they are methods and strategies that help you have innovative ideas and come up with new solutions. And they're designed to help you move beyond what's obvious or conventional or what's your typical way of thinking. So the goal of creative thinking techniques is to help you unlock the creative potential of individuals and in your group, help explore new solutions to challenges, and help you think about different, more inventive approaches. So the key characteristics really being that they break away from traditional thought processes, they help us explore new things, and they promote an environment where creativity thrives. So how this works really, if you think about it, your brain has got more neurons in it than there are stars in the Milky Way. It's an amazing thing, your brain. And what we need to do is to get our brains to think differently from how they normally think. Because, with habits, it's easy. We get ingrained sort of into a bit of a rut in terms of how we can think. So what creative thinking techniques do is it disrupts the way our brains think, and it helps us to look at things from different perspectives. And it's great when you get groups doing that as well. So groups likewise, even if they're a very diverse group, particularly if they're used to working together, can get into a way of looking at the world, a way of seeing the world. So using these techniques disrupts that and helps you get some fresh ideas and different approaches. So before you start to use any creative thinking techniques in your brainstorming sessions, your strategy, your innovation sprints, there are a few things that I think it's useful to know, and these will help you use your creative thinking techniques in a way that is most useful and going to get the best results for you. So firstly, go for a creative warm-up. So do something that gets people out of what they've been doing, the day-to-day thinking, whatever it is they've just come from, so they can warm up and get into your session. So a creative warm-up could be something like the alternative uses technique. So this could be something like, here's a stapler, what else could I use this stapler for? Let's try and think of 30 different ways we can use this stapler to do things other than to staple. And I've actually done another video about the alternative uses technique on the YouTube channel, Big Bang Partnership YouTube channel. So go and have a look at that. It's only a couple of minutes long. But you think about it, you're going to be using your brain in a different way. So it's really good to warm it up and get it out of what it's doing and into the creative space that you want it to get into. So do some activities first to do a good warm up. The other thing that's really important, and there are 12 things, so this is number 2, is psychological safety. Again, I've talked about this on so many previous shows, but it's definitely worth a mention here. If you want people to be creative, then they need to share ideas, speak up, sometimes say some outlandish or very different things. And in order to do that, they need to feel that that's okay, right? It's okay to do that in this space, and that there'll be no personal repercussions. That's what psychological safety is. It's making it a good space for people to be creative together. So it's really important that if you're facilitating this or leading a team, that you create that environment where ideas are welcomed and they're built on rather than being shot down. And another useful tip, number 3, is to get top of mind ideas out first and then build on them. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. I've got sort of a bit of a running order to show you. But the thing is with our brains is that unless we can empty out all the things that we're already thinking, our brains don't like open loops. They want to close the loop. So it's really important for people to be able to sort of dump out there all the things that are already in their heads, get them down, and then they can move forward and build on that and create some fresh thinking. So get the easy, quick, obvious, already thought of ideas out there first. The other thing is that throughout the process, with tip number 4, is innovation is about diverging and converging. We're doing divergent thinking and convergent thinking all the way through the process. Divergent means that we're opening up, convergent means that we're making choices and narrowing down our options. And creative thinking is about divergent thinking. So opening it up and making sure we're thinking really widely and searching for different solutions. Tip number 5 is to cycle often and close late. This is sort of a creative precept, it's known as. And what it means is that don't just do one creative thinking activity and think that's it, we're done, and unless you strike gold on the first go, usually you will need to come at it from a few different ways, using a few different techniques. And in this show, I've got a toolkit of so many different techniques that you can use to do that. Tip number 6 is that premature evaluation kills creativity. So keep the evaluation and the analysis and the selection of ideas as a separate bit of the process from having the ideas in the first place, because our brains need to work in sort of different gears in different ways for each of those. One way to be creative, another way to narrow down the options and make choices. So keep the two separate. When you're doing these creative thinking techniques, keep them creative and keep them divergent that way. Tip number 7 is the more ideas, the better, because ideas are really combinations of other ideas. So if you only have one idea, idea A, you're only going to have one idea. But if you have another idea, idea B, you've got 3 ideas because you've got idea A, idea B, and then the 2 ideas together, third idea A and B, and so it goes on the more ideas you have. So the more ideas, the better. Quantity matters, as does tip number 7. Language matters. So sorry, I think that's tip number 8. Language matters, tip number 8. And this is about using language that builds on ideas. So we don't yes, but. But means that we say, yes, that's fine, but actually I don't agree. We're yes anding, saying yes, and then to build on that. So you are using one idea as a stepping stone to another idea, using positive language that builds forwards rather than closes things down. So keep the ideation and analytical selection separate, as I've said. So don't evaluate too quickly. That was tip number 6. Tip number 9 is to keep those two separate. tip number 10 is to use a mix of techniques and media. So I'm going to share quite a number of techniques with you, and it's really good to mix those up and to mix the kinds of activities that you're doing, so that you're not using very similar creative thinking techniques in your session. You're maybe using 2, 3, 4, even more, and they're coming from using different things and different applications. Have breaks is tip number 11, because the brain can get quite tired. You're using it in a different way. You're forcing it to connect the neurons differently. So it is hard work for the brain. So it might not feel like it, and hopefully it feels fun. But having breaks certainly helps people be more productive. And then tip number 12 is that, remember, although these creative thinking techniques are really useful and really valuable and can disrupt thinking both individually and in groups, it is people who have the ideas, not the techniques. So the people also need to be in the right mindset, in the right place to use these for them to do as well as these techniques can do as well as they can for you. Okay, so before we get into the techniques themselves, I promised you a way of making sure that people can get past the existing ideas or the obvious ideas or the top of mind ones and get through those, get them all out so that you can move forward and then start to get some fresh thinking from these creative thinking techniques. So firstly, as I've already said, make sure you do some sort of creative warm-up, and that can be anything. It could be drawing, getting a pen and drawing a portrait of your neighbour or somebody else on the screen, and only doing it in a single line and seeing what they come up with. It can be doing something like the alternative uses technique, which I talked about with the stapler, or you can use any object. It doesn't have to be a stapler. So secondly, ask them to brain dump all the existing current top of mind ideas out. I like to get people to work individually with a pile of sticky notes, one idea per sticky note, and they just sit there for a few minutes until everything they've got in their head already is out, and then they can be sorted, you can discuss, and then you can move on from those, because the brain will like that. The brain can be then more creative because it knows that those ideas have been captured. When you've done that, you can then improve the ideas that you've just got out onto those sticky notes with using even better if techniques. So what would make these ideas even better? So you're starting to build on them. You take those obvious ideas and you say, how can we make that work better? How can it do more? How could we expand it? How could we be more ambitious? How could we make it bigger? So that's another step. And then after that step, you can go into what if scenarios and a lot more original and inventive thinking to stretch for new ideas. And again, these techniques will help you to do that. So I hope that's okay. If you've got any questions, let me know. Let me know if you're watching live, if you've got any questions or comments, or if you're watching on replay. Sometimes, I've got some videos over on the YouTube channel that I did a couple of years ago, and people are still commenting and asking things on there, and I'm still commenting and answering. So I really enjoy that. So please let me know. Okay, right. There are different types of creative thinking techniques. And they've got sort of different uses, but you can actually mix and match these quite a lot. Firstly, there is the technique of not thinking at all. And I know that sounds very odd and very unusual for me to say a creative thinking technique is just not to think about it. But there's lots of research, and if you think about your personal experience as well, that shows that actually if we put a problem into our mind, if we sort of reflect on it, read anything or watch, speak to people about it, and then leave it alone, we go for a walk, we maybe get a good night's sleep, go to the gym, have a shower, something like that, quite often we'll get ideas about how to solve that challenge. And it's because the creative subconscious has been working on it in the background while we've been doing other things. So we're not busy doing analytical thinking trying to solve it. We're busy doing something else, and the brain has been working away in the background. And because we've stopped thinking about it, we can actually tune in to those ideas and what's come up. So actually, not thinking about it is a really good solution. And sometimes what I quite like to do, if a group gets stuck or they need some fresh ideas or something like that, I'll say, right, okay, let's just go off for a walk, 10 minutes outside, get some fresh air, have a stroll, and then come back in. And when they come in, they're really re-energized, full of more ideas and wants to go again. So that's also good for a break as well. There are things like great questions. Great, if you ask great questions, they really provoke great thinking. So questions like, how might we achieve this? What if we did that? And I've got a full article and video on great questions. Actually, if you have a look on the bigbangpartnership.co.uk website, go to the blogs, and there's a whole article on how to use great questions and do that. So I'm not going to cover that too much here today. What I am going to talk about though are the types of creative thinking techniques, which are reframing, stretching, exaggeration, force fitting, attribute listing or morphological analysis, visual and 3D thinking, association, combining, and lateral thinking. So they're all different categories or types of creative thinking techniques, and I'm going to give you a few examples of techniques you can use for each of those types of creative thinking. So there's loads here, and if you want to go back and watch it, you'll be able to find chapters on the YouTube channel and just go select the bit that you want. If you want to zoom in, for instance, on force fitting or exaggeration, you can do that and go over to that chapter there. So let's start off with the first of these types, which is reframing. So what reframing means is that you just look at something from a different perspective. You look at the challenge or the opportunity from a different point of view. One way of doing that, which is pretty straightforward and actually really powerful in terms of the results it can generate, is reversal. So that means doing a reverse brainstorming. So thinking, instead of thinking, how could we make this really, really good? You think, well, what would it take to make this really fail? And then work backwards from there and then pick out some ideas from that. So you're flipping the way that you look at it. Similar to that is just changing problems to opportunities. If you've got some challenges, you say, well, how do we make this work for us? How can we actually turn this into a win instead of it being a threat and something that we're concerned about? How can we actually work this to our favour and make it something that we're excited about and that could be a good opportunity for us? So flipping that thinking, which is something, of course, that entrepreneurs and innovators are good at doing, and it is quite an easy one that you can do. Also coming into reframing is the 5 whys technique. That's a really old one, but a good one. And it's often used in safety and root cause analysis and in those sorts of environments, but you can use it really for anything, to explore anything. Just keep asking why. Why is it like this? And then you get an answer, and then ask why again, and keep asking why until you find yourself in a bit of a loop. You can't ask why anymore, and see where that takes you. And role storming as well is a form of reframing, where you can get people to brainstorm, but get people to brainstorm from somebody else's perspective. It could be from the customer's perspective, or a certain type of stakeholder, or from a certain location, those sorts of things. So different ways of coming at a challenge or an opportunity. So I hope that's useful, and I hope it all makes sense. Let me know what you think. The next type of creative thinking technique that I'm going to cover is stretching. So what stretching means is, how can you, push this as far as you can go, or push it further than you might ordinarily go. Just, push yourself that little bit more and see what comes out. And a couple of great techniques for this are crazy 8s and 30 circles. And these are really easy. All you need is, a bit of paper, or a virtual whiteboard space, and you can do this. So what crazy 8s is, it's a technique that Jake Knapp writes about in his book Sprint, the Google Ventures sprint process. And you get a piece of paper. Everybody gets a piece of paper, folds it so that it ends up in 8 boxes, just an A4 sheet, and they've got a pen. And then they spend 1 minute creating an idea in each box for the challenge that you're working on. So it's called working alone together. So everybody spends 1 minute working in one box, sketching, drawing their ideas, and then the minute's up, the facilitator says, right, on to the next box, and you keep going through the 8 boxes. And people are usually okay with the first 3 or 4, 5, 6, and then when they're starting to get to 6, 7, 8, they're finding it's a bit more of a stretch to think of some different things or to look at things in a different way. And often it's in that stretch that the magic happens. So it's really worth just pushing that little bit further to seeing what comes out. Some people find that they go the other way and that it takes them a while to warm up. You know, the first 2, 3, 4 are quite challenging, struggling to think of things, and then they get into it, and 5, 6, 7, and 8 start to get a lot easier, and then they have the best ideas that way. 30 circles is literally you give people a printed page or a flip chart or something, a virtual whiteboard with 30 circles on it, 30 blank circles, and you ask them to fill in every circle with a different idea. And that is a super stretch as well. That's really, really good. And it's great fun, and you get some fun ones. You know, people do put some fun and enjoyable ones in there because they need to make the numbers up, but you get some really fantastic things as well that people wouldn't have thought about. What happens, you see, and why stretching works so well, is that people get some ideas out and then they think, well, that's it. You know, it starts to get a bit tough, so they think they're done, and they're not really done. They're just getting the first wave of ideas out, and this helps people to push through that and get some even better and even more ideas through. The next type of technique is exaggeration, which is what it says on the tin, really. So you just ask people to exaggerate what they're going for, exaggerate the result, and think about how they might achieve it. So how might we double or treble this, or how might we quadruple the results? How could we, 10x the turnover, or 10x the impact, or reach 100 times more people? So make it bigger and make it bolder, because when you make things bigger and bolder, you can't get there by doing the things you're already doing and just doing them a bit better or a bit more productively. You've got to change the way you do things. So this is how exaggeration can work really well. It forces you to make a step change in thinking in order to get the result that you're looking for. So you can go big and you can go smaller. So how might we halve this? How might we quarter it? Reduce by 75%, whatever. So you're thinking, okay, we're spending this much money. What would we do if we only had half of it? How would we still deliver this? And actually, this is really powerful. And I've used this with entrepreneurs who have gone, I'd love to launch this new product, but actually it's going to cost me X amount to do it. And I just can't find that finance. I just can't fund that budget in order to do this well. So then we'll go, okay, how much, what if you did it with half? What if you did it by 25%? And what they actually find is that they can do these things for a lot less than they originally thought. And then they can get on their journey and it's far more achievable. And they end up launching products that are really well bootstrapped, and the costs are really nicely, tightly managed, and they get results. Zooming in and out is a form of exaggeration. If you think, what would this look like if we were on the moon? Excuse me, croaky throat. If we were looking at this from outer space, looking down on it, what would it look like? What would it look like if we were looking at it from the, being an atom and looking outwards? So all of that works as well. Excuse me. I do apologise there. I just had a bit of a cough. So think about extreme consequences. The worst thing that could happen. If the worst thing that could possibly happen happened, what would we do? And then what can you learn from that? Think about the extreme user, the customer who is a super fan, or the customer who buys everything, uses everything, and what is it that they're doing? What can you learn from that? That's a design thinking technique as well. And think about opposite worlds. So this is how we do it, but they do it like that over there. What about if we were to to do it that way instead? So all of these things, all of these techniques are really about disrupting the normal thought patterns and getting you to think bigger, differently, and come at it from different angles. Okay, so Let's move on now to force fitting and random stimulus and all of that. So these are some of my favourites. I love this. Force fitting, all that means is that you take something completely different, some different solutions or some different stimulus, and you make it work for the problem you're trying to solve. And whatever it is, you've just got to make it work. You've got to make it fit, and that forces your brain to work really hard to do that. And great stuff comes out as a result. So, random stimulus or random stimuli. Again, I've got a detailed article on this on the bigbangpartnership.co.uk website. So, check this out, and I'll put the links into the show notes as well. All you're doing is you're getting some sort of random object, or it could be a page in a magazine or a newspaper. It could be a picture. Sometimes I've used music, and you ask people to use that to help solve the problem. It could be here is, for instance, a calculator. So just random. I've just picked it up from my desk. Write some words down that describe the calculator. That's step one. Step two would be, okay, use all of those words now and put them into a sentence that solves the problem we're working on today, or solves the challenge we're working on today. Doesn't have to be a sentence. It could be turn those words into something that would be a solution for our new product that we are developing. And some big ideas have come out of that. It sounds a bit bonkers when you first hear it and think about it, but when you do it, it's surprisingly useful. Cross-industry inspiration is easy. Look outside of the industry that you're working in and seeing how problems are being solved elsewhere. See what they're doing and see how you can force fit, take the best of, and make it work in your environment. I hear so many times, well, yeah, that's what that industry is doing, but they're different, we're special. And of course you're special, but actually there's always things we can transfer in. We might need to adapt and change it a bit, but there are always things we can learn and adapt from other people. And constrained brainstorming is another one. It's where you put parameters and rules and boundaries around brainstorming. So rather than anything goes, you say, okay, we want ideas that fit this particular criteria. And actually, constraints are really empowering for creativity. Charles Eames said that that's what makes great design, right? So Eames, the furniture designer, is that constraint, because it forces us to think differently. And actually, we can be more creative with constraints sometimes than if we had no constraints at all. So try doing that. Okay, we're doing well. We've got a few more to do, but I'll keep going, and we're nearly there. Attribute listing or morphological analysis is the next type of creativity technique I'm going to talk about. Attribute listing is about products, morphological analysis is about problems. Okay, so what these both mean is very simply that you take the problem or you take the product or whatever it is, and you break it down into its component parts, into its individual pieces, and that you explore those dimensions and see what you can do with them and find out how you can modify them or vary them. So if you've got a challenge, like we want to reach a new market or we want to 10x our turnover, then you think, well, what are all the different component parts? How might we do each of those differently? And you break it down into those, and then you use each of those as the focus of your brainstorming. With a product, you could take something like the jumbo jet, which since the first jumbo jet flew has been, it's got thousands and thousands of components, individual small parts, and each of those has been sort of reinvented and modified many times over. So what was originally a jumbo jet and still looks like a jumbo jet is actually very different in terms of the materials and how things are made, because all the time the product development is happening to make these better and better, more sustainable, safer, all the things, lighter, all of that stuff. Okay, so that's a really good one for complex challenges. I did start to get a bit into the AI image generation when I was doing these. So you've got a few AI generated images coming up, which was great fun. So the next one is visual and 3D thinking, and just getting people to think out loud and draw in pictures. So it doesn't have to be sort of, artwork. It can be artwork, but it doesn't have to be artwork. It can be flow charts, it can be systems, it can be lines connecting everything. It's about getting them to describe what they're thinking and develop their thinking by drawing, and that's really great. Sketching is really great. Um, Also, getting people to build things with Lego, cardboard boxes, junk modelling, Play-Doh, anything like that is really, really good. So, because it's tactile, it activates different parts of the brain. It's very hands-on, and you can, this is obviously works better when it's in person, but you can get people to do visual thinking in 2 dimensions, of course, when they're working remotely on virtual whiteboards. And quite often, I'll ask people to grab a pen and a paper and sketch something or map something out, or create some sort of diagram or flow chart of something. And it really helps with communication between the team as well as you're doing this. Association is a creative thinking technique type where you're thinking of one thing and it's generating ideas about another. The most simple way of doing this is mind mapping, where you put your key thing that you're working on in the centre, and then essentially you just capture all the ideas and thoughts you have about that around the edges, and you interconnect the ones that are related. But it works in the same way as your brain does. When you think about one thing, there are all sorts of associations that your brain thinks about other things, right? So it triggers all sorts of other associations. So doing that and capturing the connections between them as well. Team mind mapping is really simple and really powerful. Combining is when you've got a load of ideas, saying, what do you get when you combine this idea with that idea? And sometimes if we've got a room full of ideas, virtually or in person, I will mark up each idea and give it a letter. Sometimes we could have 20, 30 top ideas and say, okay, so what happens when you put idea A with idea F and put those combinations in random, and then you get some even better builds out of that as well. And some of those combinations are really unusual. So if you do random combinations, that works the best. Don't try and match things. Just be random, and pair things up. And then, we're nearly there. Last one, lateral thinking. So lateral thinking is when you are solving problems for strategy and innovation, but you're not coming, head on. You're not coming at it directly. You're thinking more around, from the side and indirectly and from different perspectives. So some great ones are intermediate impossibles. So this is where you ask people to think about ideas that are themselves impossible or highly impractical, but they can spark better ideas. So what that does is it lifts the practicality or possibility constraint, and helps you think in different directions. If you're interested in lateral thinking, have a look at, of course, all the work by Edward de Bono, who is really the person who created the concept and phrase of lateral thinking, and who really helped make it such a big and important thing that it is today. Also, for lateral thinking, we've got things like provocation. So give people a provocative statement or assumption that's clearly wrong or absurd, and then use that to generate new ideas. So, for instance, a hotel made of chocolate, based in the desert, is a possible thing. The ice hotel, if you are familiar with the ice hotel in Scandinavia, actually having a hotel made of ice, if you think about it, that's a really unusual, and it sounds quite a challenging, almost impossible thing to do. But it's there, it's been there for quite a long time. And the last I heard, it was doing very well. So think about, stretching it that way. Take your assumptions and try and disprove it, which is disproving assumptions. And finally, escape thinking. I like this one. If people are stuck, or if there's something really significant that people keep coming back to, escape thinking is where you take that away, right? You take that dominant feature away, park it, and escape from it. so your thought processes focuses on everything else and ignores that for the time being, so that it just doesn't overshadow everything else. Now, I know there's a load here. We've gone through all these different types of creative thinking techniques, and what I'm aiming to do going forward, in not necessarily the next one, but in some future shows, is I'll do a deeper dive into these and talk about how to use them. But I've used each of these techniques, over the last 2 or 3 months, each of these, a couple of times in different situations, and they all continually to work really well for me. And I've used them in all sorts of environments for much longer than that. But I just wanted to share some that I've been using recently. The sorts of things I've been using them for have been, strategy, innovation, business growth, business planning sessions, and venture creation. So, and venture scale, so which means scaling up a business or an organisation, and also in some culture change work actually as well. So look, there's loads here. You've got a little library of techniques that you can use, and you can keep it fresh. Don't keep using the same technique with the same people over and over. If you're working with the same group, keep it fresh, keep it disruptive. You've got lots here to choose from, I hope. And if you'd like any more information, head over to bigbangpartnership.co.uk. There's loads of blogs on there. There's some deep dives into some of these techniques on there already. Also on the Big Bang Partnership YouTube channel. And if you do bigbangpartnership.co.uk/resources, there's some free stuff there and toolkits that you can download. Right, that's me out of here. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Idea Time Show, brought to you by Dr. Jo North. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and access more completely free resources at bigbangpartnership.co.uk/resources. We'll see you next time.